Who dat? Welcome to the podcast you've been waiting for. Great perspective and exclusive interviews.
It's a hard job for those guys because it's happening fast.
The kind of Saints insight and fun commentary you won't get anywhere else.
We've got plenty of technology to speed things up.
It's time to kick off your Been There, Done That Saints podcast, where we hand it off to our host, Mike Nabors, and Super Bowl winning linebacker, Scott Shanle.
Proud of these guys.
I'm not thinking about February of 2020 right now. That's a long way away, right? And that's an overwhelming feeling if you decide to look to there. So I'm just focused on the here and now, staying in the moment, enjoying getting a chance to be out here and work with a lot of these young guys, work with a lot of these new guys.
Drew Brees talking at the recent OTAs for the New Orleans Saints. Does any veteran get excited about OTAs? Well, if you're Drew Brees, he gets excited about everything on the football field. That's why he's a future Hall of Famer. Welcome into another Been There, Done That podcast. We're going to hear more from Brees in just a second. We also have a special guest, Victor Howell, my coworker at Cox Sports Television. We've put together Saints shows for years. Since the Sean Payton, Drew Brees era began. I'm going to bring in Scott Shanle. You work with Victor Howell. I know a lot of good stories are ahead, and we have a lot of fun working together.
Absolutely. I couldn't, when I started media after my football career was over, I couldn't have asked for a better team in CST. Obviously, with yourself, Mike, helped get me on board, and then having Victor as the main host working in studio, I couldn't ask for a better partner. I mean, he showed me the ropes. He gave me all the ins and outs. I go back to the first show I ever did. I had no idea what I was doing. I knew how to talk football. I just didn't know what camera to look at, when to interject, how long to talk. And so all those little nuances that people, I don't think, give enough credit to. You see all these sports shows on TV and people think, oh, it's not that hard to just talk sports. It's not hard to talk sports, but it's hard to know what camera you're looking at. There's a flow to the show, and Victor helped teach me that. And like I said, I couldn't ask for a better host to introduce me into the media world.
Victor, if you listen to this podcast, we're just buttering you up here. And it's Victor Howell's first ever podcast. So we're a part of history here. We're going to have him come up, talk about, great stories of covering the Sean Payton, Drew Brees era. And when you talk about Payton and Brees, last year's theme was prove them right because the expectations were sky high for the New Orleans Saints. Well, Scott, Drew Brees was asked at OTAs, what is the theme for the Saints entering this season coming up? And he said, get better. So either it's just going to be a simple theme or they haven't thought of anything yet. I mean, what do you think of that comment?
That probably tells me they haven't thought of anything yet. They haven't sat down. And I know a lot of times Drew comes up with the pregame chant. He comes up with a lot of stuff. And I think a lot of those things he doesn't just come up with without seeing the nucleus of the team, the identity of the team, what that team looks like for that year. Because it's amazing how much the dynamics of a team change year in and year out in the NFL. There's going to be new faces. So I'm sure they're going to wait to see what this dynamic of the 2019 Saints team looks like before they come up with slogans and all these different things. Or, hey, maybe they're to the point where slogans are overrated. We don't need that. We just need to get it done. No excuses, whatever it needs to be, and just go out there and play football.
Yeah, we're going to hear from Victor Howell in just a second. Victor Howell hails from the state of Texas, and so does Drew Brees. Let's hear a little more from Drew Brees when he talked at the recent OTAs, getting the question you knew he was going to get, how does this team move on? I mean, he was asked about it last year after the Minnesota game, but boy, back-to-back years with tough endings. How does this Saints football team put it all together and move on?
You always try to take your experiences from the year before and turn it into something positive, right? Use it as momentum, use it as motivation, chip on your shoulder, unfinished business, whatever you want to term it.
We heard from Sean Payton in our last podcast, Scott, and didn't get fired up about any questions about how they're going to move on. They're a little bit used to it because they had it a year ago, but I like the approach that Payton and Brees are taking with these questions.
Yeah, and let's be honest, a lot of it is you're to the point now with the way the last two seasons have ended. It's hard to come up with anything more motivating than, hey, we just need to finish this deal. We need to overcome bad calls the best we can. We need to make the plays at the end of games the best we can, and everything will take care of itself. And some of it, I honestly think, Mike, is just they're at a loss for how to address it after the way these last two seasons have ended. I don't think that's a precursor to this team's defeated or they're down and out. I just think they're all about business. They're all about action, and they're kind of out of the slogan and coach speak talk right now.
All right, as promised, we bring in a guest we all know very well. To give you a background, he was a prep basketball star in the big city of Dallas. He was the host for the Pelicans and the Hornets. He is Cox Sports Television's jack of all trades. He's hosted CST Tonight and Saints Tonight for a long, long time. And he's a husband and he's a father of 4 girls, including triplets. Ladies and gentlemen, we bring in Victor Howell.
Yo. Oh, wow. What a warm welcome. How about that? That is what a wonderful studio audience, and I'm honored to say that this is my first podcast. So to do it with this outstanding packed crowd and to be with you guys, hey, this is great. How are you, sir? Nice to talk to y'all.
We're good. You know, I really wanted to have you on, but I wanted to wait until we kind of had our legs under us a little bit. We wanted to be really good when you came on because you're such a polished broadcast veteran. But let me go back to, I talked about CST, and that's where I met you, and you're a good friend, and we've known each other for years. But the first time I met Victor Howell, we were covering the Final Four in Indianapolis when LSU was there, and John Brady was the head coach, and then the CST got the Saints contract. And, you know, we talk a lot about, you know, what's happened in the Sean Payton era, Vic. But you've hosted Saints Tonight from the beginning of the Sean Payton era, and we've had Drew Brees with us, and we have shows that we take a lot of pride in. But let's face it, when I met you, it was the first year of the Sean Payton era. You know, Shanle was coming onto the scene, a lot of new faces. You know, who would have ever thought, here we are all these years later, and the Saints have gone on this run. It's incredible.
It was a magical run from what they've been able to do. And quite honestly, with the 2 big teams in New Orleans, the Pelicans had it happen to them when they drafted AD. And we know there's a lot of drama right now with AD wanting to get out. But here they are again with the number 1 pick with Zion about set to come to the Big Easy. And what it brings around is that expectation and that hope. When we were back there starting the show, you had the unfortunate happenings with the hurricane and so much devastation in the city. The teams playing, you know, vagabonds are playing all over the place, and they finally come back home. You got the dramatic night on Monday Night Football with Steve and the magical play against Atlanta. And then all of a sudden you start to get this enthusiasm back and a reason to bond with the city. And there was a lot of hope. Well, the Saints made that hope a reality. Have they hit a couple of bumps in the road? Well, sure. But they went on to the Super Bowl. They've come so close again to getting back to, 2, maybe 3 more. It's kind of what the Pelicans have done. They got AD. They made one nice run in the playoffs, but he got to be a frustrated superstar he wants out. But now all of a sudden the city is feeling this revitalization again of hope on the basketball side because now Zion's coming in. It's kind of that same feeling we had back in the 06-07. Here comes a quarterback that can bring new life to the team. Here comes a young, energetic head coach. Here come players like Shanle that have a little experience under their belt, but they're bringing their expertise to the city. You've got the big Reggie Bush splash that comes on the – and then all of a sudden there was this hope, hey, can this finally be it? And here we are, 13 years later, and it is it. It's and unfortunately, it might be getting closer to the end of the magical run than more of the beginning, but it has been a hell of a ride for all of us.
That's the beauty of bringing Victor Howell on the podcast, the great parallels between the Pelicans and Saints. And I agree with you. I mean, last week we talked about, you know, getting Zion is almost the makeup call for the non-call in New Orleans because they've been, you know, everybody's kind of hanging their heads after that. But let's talk about, you know, you growing up. And you know, you've seen the Saints for a long time, Vic. I mean, I came on the scene in 06, and Shanle did as well, and I feel very fortunate for that. But you've seen a lot of Saints football prior to Sean Payton. Does that make you really appreciate more what you've covered the last 13, 14 years?
Oh, sure. And my background and history with it, and I've told this story before to people just in general conversations. As you mentioned, I played high school basketball in Dallas before I went to play ball in college, but my growing up years were in Dallas, but I was born in New Orleans and we left when I was 8 years old. And, you know, the Saints, the 2 biggest fans of the Saints used to be Shoetown and Pizza Hut, because back then with blackouts, you know, and I'm not joking, there were 8, 10, 12,000 tickets. And of course you start hearing on the news, well, if by Thursday, 1:00 tickets aren't sold, the blackout won't be lifted, you won't be able to see the game. And all of a sudden, Shoetown and Pizza Hut step up and they buy tickets. So you go in and buy a large pizza or you go get a pair of sneakers, you're getting 4, 6, 8, 20 tickets to bring a party to the Superdome. Now they got 20,000 plus, on a waiting list. And I can remember moving to Dallas And I was there in the years, the Roger Staubach, Too Tall Jones, Harvey Martin, Randy White, Tony Dorsett, and Tom Landry's the coach, and they made that run. They beat Denver in the Super Bowl in the Superdome. And I remember being out in the city, we're out in our front yard banging pots and pans, celebrating, and it was much more like a country club type atmosphere. It's just like, oh, nice job, boys, you won. And I'm thinking, boy, if this was in New Orleans, we'd be turning this town upside down, much like we did in 2010 when it came through. But yeah, I was there during the struggle years when you weren't even sure you were going to be able to see the game on TV if you were a fan. And then to move back, come back into Louisiana like I did. I was 11 years at CBS. I was there with the Ditka era. I was there at the end of the Jim Mora era. And to see all the moves they were trying to make but just could never get over the hump. And then all of a sudden we have this tragedy in New Orleans with this devastating storm, and you're looking for something, as we just mentioned, something to hold on to bring everybody together. And I'm sure Scott has that sense of pride to this day because he was a big part of that. All of a sudden, hey, our team's coming back. Don't let people fool you. There was a time when Mr. Benson, God rest his soul, hey, this team's out of here. We're going to San Antonio. I've got business, properties over there and interest over there. We're going to move the team. And everybody's like, wait a minute, don't kick us when we're down. The city's been destroyed. We want to hold on to something. Come on back. Well, then the team comes back, and the rest, as we say, is history. And it's a huge sense of pride for what they were able to do. And now to be on this side after seeing that other side for so long, it's quite a turnaround.
Vic, how close did you think that the Saints actually got to leaving? You talked about after Hurricane Katrina, obviously Tom Benson was looking at San Antonio as a destination for the Saints. You being there as long as you have been and seeing that transition into the Coach Payton era, did you ever feel like it was a reality that could happen, the team get moved?
There was probably a little bit of a time, Scott, when I thought that maybe it was maybe getting past the 50-50 mark, if for no other reason. You've got the Alamo Dome in San Antonio. It's just sitting there waiting to be used. It's played once a year for the Alamo Bowl, but you already had a stadium covered indoors, nice city, big airport, easy to get to San Antonio, close to Houston. Football is huge in Texas, as you well know. And, one of the biggest questions was, well, here's the Superdome. Are we even going to be able to save it? I mean, you remember seeing the pictures, the holes in the roof and the water pouring through and all the devastation on the ground. How much of downtown are we going to be able to save? Or are we going to be able to save this building? And then there were the talks of, well, maybe we need to build a new stadium in a different part of the river, maybe move it across to the West Bank. Where do we find someplace for a stadium? And that to me was when it started getting to be, all right, if there's a lot of doubt in New Orleans and here's this beautiful stadium, it may not be as big as the Superdome, but it's still, 60,000. It's indoors. It has turf. It's got goalposts. They're ready to go. He has business interests over there. He might be serious. I mean, I was at a game when he got into an incident with one of the local New Orleans TV stations. They wanted pictures, and there was a big shoving match. Get those cameras out of my face. He didn't want to talk about it. But by the same token with that conversation, I think that's part of his business side. And he might have been one of the few that said, you know what, we can rebuild this. I'm not going to pay for it by myself, but if I get the state involved, I'm going to bring this team back, and I think we can do something. And that's how all of a sudden, that's how you become with Benson Towers, and then you get to deal with the state for the low rental, and then the revenue sharing, and then boom, here we are now. People are begging to get into the Dome. So it was quite the savvy business move by Mr. Benson. But I would say for a short time, Scott, I was probably leaning that maybe it was a little better than 50%. That they might be moving. He might be serious about this because this is a business. This is an investment. They need a place to play. They're not going to be playing 16 road games all year long. LSU's not working out. This might be their chance to make it happen.
Yeah, I don't think any of us guys who got there in 06 we didn't quite understand the depth or the magnitude of everything that was going on. We were just there trying to extend our careers, trying to have a good season, and it all worked out that year, obviously going to the NFC Championship game. But one of the great things about having our guest on today, Victor Howell, my partner in crime in CST, is we get to add a little more depth to this podcast because my man knows a lot about basketball, and I'm not going to let him get out of here today without asking him about the Anthony Davis situation, because I haven't had a whole chance to really talk to you about that with the Saints season over. I've been kind of vocal about it on Twitter, give my 2 cents, but what's your feeling about the situation, how it went down, how it's still going down, and how you think it's going to turn out?
I think when it went down, this is my opinion now, but I think when it went down, his agent is holding 5 cards, and he had 3 of a kind, and he put it all on the table and said, here, I got a best hand, not knowing that somebody else was sitting with a full house and better, and he got trumped. I think it was a horrible business move on his side. It has soured the relationship. I give David Griffin all the credit in the world. He's trying to bring him back because he knows what a talent he is. But Anthony did a lot of damage to his image and his personality with the city, with the way he treated him, wearing the "That's All Folks" shirt. He got caught flipping the middle finger to a young fan on the way out. He wants to play, and then all of a sudden he tries to make himself look like he's the bad guy. Well, hey, I want to play, but they're not playing him. Well, right, because the Pelicans have millions of dollars invested in you, and they don't want you to go out and get hurt, then get nothing for you. Then you're going to walk away to another team. So I got it. I mean, Alvin Gentry should have gotten Coach of the Year for the way he handled that mess. But I was disappointed, Scott. He for all the years that he talked about legacy and wanting to contribute to the city that invested everything in him and want to bring a championship, he complains about the team. This team last year, 1 year ago, in fact, 1 year and 1 month ago, swept the same Portland Trailblazer team that just took Golden State to the limits to try to get out of the Western Conference. So it's not like they were that far away. They needed to add some more pieces. Now, does some of that fall on the front office? Absolutely. They've got to get some better players, some better role position players around him. But I was sad to see that with all the tie-ins, with LeBron's agency, the Paul being his agent, coming out as vocal as they did when they did it, and all these fans are in uproar what they can do. New Orleans owns him. New Orleans owns him for another year. They don't have to trade him at all. They've got his contract rights through another year. Now, as we all know in that league, in the business, they're not going to just sit there and let him go for free. He's too good of a talent. They're going to move him. But everybody who was you got to do it by the All-Star break last year. No, you don't. They got another year and a half with this guy. They're going to use him the best they can. Once they realized the season really wasn't salvageable, they benched him. They played him a minimum of 20 minutes because, at least earned some of that money. Then he started getting some of the quote unquote injuries and they sat him down to rest him. But that's why I think it's so magical that with this new lottery format and guaranteeing the top 4 teams instead of the top 3, it brought those percentages down. And sure enough, New Orleans gets the ping pong balls to bounce their way. And here comes Zion. So now it's like, all right, you want us to go get somebody else? That's what David Griffin's trying to tell him. You want somebody else? Look who I got. The best guy in college basketball who looks like a tight end. I know Sean Payton jokingly said, hey, if you got some free time, you can play with us. That kind of athleticism. We're bringing him. We've got Drew. We've got you. Now we're getting serious. And if you really don't want to play, then David Griffin's going to go get the best deal he can, and then they'll get rid of him. So he's a quiet guy. He's a heck of a talent. I was just disappointed to see the way if you wanted to trade, fine, wait till the end of the season when you got 1 year left and say, you know what, I'm going to let you know now. I'm not going to exercise my option. I want to be traded. But to do it before the All-Star break, thinking that you can go to the Lakers and salvage their season, I think it made his agent looked like a horse's rear end. Mike, I said that for you because I don't know where the boundaries are. I could have gone a lot worse there.
Well, since this is your maiden voyage, my friend, you can say whatever the hell you want to say on a podcast.
There you go. I think it made them look bad because they thought they were going to come out here and say it, and then 3 weeks before the All-Star break, New Orleans was going to panic and then get rid of him because LeBron wants him or the Lakers, and basically New Orleans trolled them. They've absolutely trolled LA, and look at that dumpster fire right now. Magic quitting and accusations of being backstabbed and all that kind of stuff. New Orleans played that as best as they could, and they succeeded.
Victor left the door open for me to say horse's ass for the first time on this podcast. So
nice. That's exactly where I was going.
Yeah, I just interpret what you were thinking. Hey, let's talk about this Saints football team, Vic. And, it's amazing to me. We've covered them for so long now that we keep saying, man, that window for Drew Brees, you got to take advantage of it. But that window has been extended and extended and extended, and I'm not sure how much longer it can be extended. But, what do you think of this football team now? I'm kind of troubled by the Mark Ingram departure because I thought, it was really not a whole lot more money in Baltimore. And obviously Max Unger, that's a big loss too. But, boy, they have so much talent coming back. The core of this team is young, and now they're a lot more experienced. How do you feel about this Saints team? They picked up Jared Cook as a wide receiver. They made some additions on defense. How do you feel about this Saints team since the last time we were on the air together after that terrible no call in the NFC Championship game?
Right. Well, yeah, and Scott will tell you, first and foremost with Drew Brees, I stopped several years ago, and probably last year I must have said it on, 9 of our 18 overall programs. I'm just going to quit doubting number 9 until he gives me reason to doubt him. I asked Scott several times starting around week 8 or 9, why were we not talking about number 9 as a legitimate MVP candidate? His percentages just got better. His accuracy is still there. He doesn't hit. Now he's adding a spin move like he did in Atlanta, getting hit and spinning and diving into the end zone.
That's when I thought he had the MVP.
Right. And look, if you're on defense, and I asked Scott this, I like playing with him because he's a defensive guy. When the Saints are 4th and inches and they're going for it, how do you not know that Drew's going quick count, sticking the ball over the line of scrimmage and getting a first down? Yet he never loses the ball. It works all the time. He's the best at it, and you know it's coming. It's unbelievable. And his regimen, again, until he gives me reason to doubt him, I'm just going to quit doubting him, because every time somebody did, starting 14, 15, 18 years ago, when they said you're too short to play, that chip just keeps that man going. It's the most incredible thing I've seen in sports. It's crazy.
Yeah, to me though, this offseason though, Mickey Loomis just continues to work his salary cap magic. We've seen it in some off seasons where it hasn't worked well. I'm still waiting with all these moves for Jeff Ireland to get a chance, because man, since that guy's hopped on board, the drafts have been good. They've hit in free agency. So, I'm excited about covering this team again. We could talk about the Brees window just extending, but I think there's a lot to look forward to, even after the 2 disappointing seasons back to back.
Yeah, and last year we talked so much, and I know you did, each and every week with all the stuff at the stadium, which wide receiver is going to step up for the big plays. But in the end, he still had them, in a game. We were talking about 2 or 3 minutes and a horrible call being the difference from going back to the Super Bowl. So it all certainly centers around 9. I know with Unger leaving, you have that question mark because it's such an important relationship between center and quarterback. And I know Drew's been trying to find the right rhythm. You mentioned Ingram. Scott, I'd like to ask you, is the Ingram departure, because you certainly wouldn't know when we watched all those interviews with those two connected at the shoulder, laughing together, joking together, talking about the brotherhood and everything about this being such a tight-knit group. I'm not sure I was ready to see that he was going to leave, even if he had the ability to leave. He sure did kind of get the sense that this guy was in it to win it and stay in here. So maybe that was just some smoke, and that's what he wanted to do all along. But Scott, what I want to ask you is Ingram's departure, do you think it has anything to do with him missing those first 4 games and people wondering, can this team succeed without Mark? And then they did, and knowing what Kamara can do? Or did he really think there's a better opportunity in Baltimore? Or option C, is it really just flat out about the money?
Well, I think it's a combination, a little bit of everything. Obviously, it never helps you as a player to miss time. And when he missed those 4 games, Kamara got a bigger workload. And we all know, if you ask 31 other general managers in the NFL, which running back do you want between the 2? Honestly, they're going to take Alvin Kamara. And he showed that he can be a franchise back. He's going to get that opportunity. And for Mark, I think he would still be a Saint had his agent not messed up the entire free agency process. He went in, he asked for way too much money. He asked for franchise number 1. He asked for like Todd Gurley and Zeke Elliott, Le'Veon Bell type money, and you can't do that. And the Saints obviously were turned off by that. That's when they went and started calling up other running backs in the free agency process. So I think if the agent had handled that better and been more reasonable, Mark would still be a Saint. And we all probably thought that Mark Ingram would retire a Saint. He fit in great. He was a voice in the locker room. And let's face it, what are we going to talk about now, Victor? We got to find a new guy. Angry Mark Ingram was born on CST tonight. And what are we going to do? We're going to have to find somebody else to give a cool nickname to now.
Yeah, because I don't see Alvin never shows to be angry. He's just smooth all the time. He's so emotionless. You don't see him a lot of expression. He just goes out there and beats people and makes them look silly. But you're right. I'll be interested to see if anybody in Baltimore can figure out a way to make Ingram angry like we did when we tabbed him and to see how he played. But yeah, those are some great comments and perspective on Ingram. To me, when you saw the way they worked together, the numbers, the history, his passion with the fans, his relationship with the players, I was a little surprised to see him leave the way he did. But like you said, we talked about it at the beginning of the season on our show. How much do you put on Kamara early because of shouldering the load? You want him to be able to last through the entire year, which he certainly proved he did. And if anybody listening to this has not seen it on Instagram or Facebook or Twitter, you've got to go look up Alvin Kamara's offseason balance and his workout. It's just ridiculous what he's doing and the way he has that balance and what they're working with these special training balls and throwing. He's got to catch them on one foot. It's amazing the work he's putting in. And then it goes back to what Mike said earlier, the way they're playing it in the front office, players they're bringing in just to fit that right niche that they need in that overall Sean Payton scheme. I'm as excited about covering it as Mike said he is. It's going to be another fun year.
It definitely is, Victor. I think one of the things that's going to be more exciting this year that we're going to have to pay attention to, I felt like last year, you started to see a changing of the tide in the identity of this Saints football team. And dare I say, the Saints team is becoming more of a defensive-led team. The defense really took over the last half of last season. The offense faded a little bit. Drew's MVP chances went out the window. They didn't perform as well late in the season. this fall is going to be an exciting time because we get a chance to see if this Saints team can be resilient. Just like in the Minnesota game, they got back up, went all the way to the NFC Championship this year, should have been in the Super Bowl, one bad non-call away. But Victor, this schedule early on is very daunting, much like we talked about last year when we got into the middle of that schedule and we kept talking about it week in and week out. Just talk about what you see this schedule early on. They have Dallas, Seattle, the Rams, all these playoff teams, how important it is to get off to a fast start with this schedule.
Yeah, well, especially after what we saw last year, because, yeah, you're right. We talked about that gauntlet a lot, and they went through it, and they were very successful doing it. But if you remember last year, those first two games, they gave up 500-something yards a game, and it was ridiculous. And then all of a sudden it kind of kicked in and maybe started going more about that identity you talked about. But yeah, when you look at where they're going, you got the Rams very early. I think that's a West Coast game, so they got to go back out there to see them again. Seattle's always interesting because of their quarterback. Wilson now gets a new contract, and how are they going to be able to play? And then Dallas before you get to your first conference game with Tampa Bay. And maybe Mike knows a little more about what Tampa Bay might be bringing to the table or not bringing to the table. But you certainly can't start this season the way you did last year, giving up all those yards and putting so much on the offense right out the bat to say, hey, come score 40 because we're giving up 45. Or we're giving up 35. We need to score 40, or we need to score 48 because we're giving up 45. They've got to be a little more solid right out of the gates to get that good bearing started. And I think last year, that was the one thing that I do remember early on was how the defense struggled. Then they found their identity and they played close. But, Scott, kind of to your point, down that stretch, and I'm not downplaying the missed call at all. We all know it was one of the most horrendous calls in the NFL ever in that period and how it's changed the way they've talked in rules. But that defense had some chances also to make some stops and down the stretch, and whether they were tired or whether they were just so deflated, they needed just that one play to stop them from getting that one first down, and they couldn't get it done there down the stretch. And I wonder how much that'll inspire them to move on and get a little better as well.
Hey, Vic, I want to talk about what we've done on Cox Sports Television, and we love having Shanle on. I loved interviewing him as a player. It was part of such a great locker room for so many years with the Saints, and we saw when they lost guys like Scott Shanle, they lost football games. They had the 3 straight 7-9 seasons. I mean, we've been really fortunate to be right there and be a part of this Payton Brees era, having Brees after every game and doing these post-game shows. Looking back at the 13-year run we've had, what stands out about the stuff that we've done, on air? Because to me, we've really been, we've had a front row seat, and it's been exciting. It's been fun.
One thing stands out to me in terms of what we do on our show is after they won the Super Bowl, I remember the weeks that Eric Ritchie, our friend and our man who goes behind enemy lines, was doing all of these features on the players in New Orleans about what it meant for that run and to get to the Super Bowl. In terms of our coverage, I wasn't with you and Scott in Minnesota when that play happens at the end, and y'all had the horrible job of having to come on the air. I remember we're coming on the air, and I'm looking at Scott via satellite, and it's just this stunned look like, what in the world just happened, and how am I going to talk about this? And then last year, being on the field when the same thing happened after a horrendous call, for me personally, probably the best thing to do wasn't even the Super Bowl post game, which was great. I had left. I've told Scott this story before, but we were there. First of all, we're recording CST tonight, the night before, and the Who is going through rehearsals in the stadium. And as we're coming on the air, it was time for them to hit their big crescendo in their song and Don't Be Fooled Again. And fireworks are going off between me and Paul Crane at the time, who's working with me. And it was like you couldn't have scripted it any better. And then you've got the magic of the game. I leave mid-third quarter because I got to get back out to the studio, and I'm outside standing on the scaffolding when Tracy Porter gets the interception. And we could hear it, and we knew something had happened, but we're on like a 10-second delay with television. Well, then as soon as you heard the Hootouts, we knew it was a big play for the Saints. All of that was magical. The post-game was magical. The confetti, the earphones on Drew's, headphones on Drew's child, all that. To me personally, it didn't get any better than we did the 3-hour coverage of the parade in New Orleans. Yeah. Because to me, while that was fun, it was the culmination of a city that had undying loyalty to a team that was bad for so many years. Then you had a city that people talk about as just a drinking city with Bourbon Street, or just a convention city. There's nothing that they're ever really good at. Then you get devastated and kicked in the ass by a storm. And, oh, boy, how are these people ever going to come back? And all these buildings, you don't want to go down there. It's a mess. And then all of a sudden, this city that has stood by its one and only team. Of course, now the Hornets are there, but as we all know, they're not a New Orleans born and bred basketball team. So you really have that one team, small market, has stood by them, withstood all of the crap that they had to go through. And then to see that team take the city, starting by the Superdome, and come down the streets in New Orleans, look at NBA celebrations. These idiots that flip cars and start fires and are breaking glass, looking like morons. What did New Orleans do? They dropped already cheap drink prices even cheaper. And they went out into the streets and just do what they always do. It was a party. And then we all get back from Miami, and I'm set up on the scaffolding downtown on St. Charles, right by City Hall, where they're going to stop and do a toast. Mike is out there. Eric's out there on the parade route. I remember even telling Mike, get your butt on the float. And Mike, sure enough, was on a float going right down the street in front of us. That, to me, those 3 hours may have been the most magical, because what you finally saw was a city and a city that stood behind its team, and a team that, despite how many bad years they had, still represented the city. They all got to come together and say, you know what? We're the best. We did it. We're the best, and you can't take it away from us. And man, that was just a party that we could have done it another 3 hours and just kept on driving. It was great.
I agree 100%, Victor. The one thing I remember, you talked about the Super Bowl. I remember, as a kid, or you watch these teams celebrate Super Bowls, and they go down maybe a couple blocks, and then they go walk up some steps, and they're standing at the front of their Capitol building or whatever it may be in whatever city. I had no clue what I was getting myself into when we had that parade that night in New Orleans. We get on these floats. I obviously know we're going on floats. It's New Orleans. They're packed with beads. We can't even walk through these floats. And I'm sitting there thinking, what? I think we're just going a couple blocks, aren't we? And we were on those floats all night. And to see the amount of people that turned out to catch beads and celebrate that championship with us, that, I think, more than anything, more than seeing people flood Miami for the Super Bowl, that parade embodied what that city is all about when it comes to Saints football. It was so impressive. And that it just I think my love for the city and the tie into the team grows more each year since I've been done. When I first got there, I had no idea what to expect. Obviously, we were good, so I thought, hey, most fan bases are going to love their team because we were good, we were winning. But I've just continued to watch what that team means to that city, and it's unlike any other place in the NFL.
No, I agree. It goes back to the conversation I had earlier when Mike was talking about the history and watching the program come through. It's a lot of times like when the Hornets, when the then Hornets were there playing. Yeah, they had some good players, and Chris Paul was there and David West. But when the Lakers would roll to town, that arena's 60% purple and gold. Why? They wanted to see Kobe Bryant. Well, back in the day for the Saints, yeah, they still supported them, but they weren't selling out to see the Saints. They were selling out to see Roger Staubach and Drew Pearson and Preston Pearson and Too Tall Jones. They wanted to see those guys come to town because those were the, quote, good football teams. Now there's 70,000 in the dome, 50,000 outside the dome wishing they could get in, and everybody's expecting the Saints to whip some rear end and get the win. It's been a complete flip. And that goes to that passion of the city that prides itself on being a party city, prides itself on the convention, bringing the people in. Everybody talks about the food and how unique it is, but I'm telling you, that's been the one team in that city that's been consistent. And for the loyalty to stand behind that team all those years, and for the team to still stay, not move, and still perform. And then they went and got players like you, Sean, Drew, Reggie, you start bringing them in, and then you watched all you guys put it together and then make that run. And then, of course, a Louisiana guy from Port Allen makes the big interception against a New Orleans born and bred famous, name in football and runs it back. It doesn't get any better. And that's why, to me, that parade just showed the culmination of a relationship that came together and said, boy, this is well worth the wait. Now let's go out and get another one.
Before our final segment, we do a more likely segment on Saints Tonight on CST, and we're going to have the more likely podcast version coming up. But before we get to that, Victor Howell, like a true host that you are, I love how you brought us all together in kind of a roundtable discussion. I want to do the same with both of you. And Vic, you can answer this first, and then Shanle, I'd love to hear what you have to say about this. But I always hear that story about, well, what would have happened if Drew Brees would have gone to Miami? They said he didn't pass the physical down there, and then the dominoes kind of fell. Nick Saban probably wouldn't have been the Alabama head coach, and so on, who the Saints would have drafted, blah, blah, blah. Well, I think Sean Payton kind of gets, the short end of the stick a little bit. I think he's had a big part of Drew's success. I'd like to have known, how Drew Brees would have been without Sean Payton if he went to Miami. How do you guys feel, who has the bigger impact? Drew Brees, Sean Payton? Do we split it down the middle? Does Drew get a little more credit? I mean, how do we slice the pie on this 13-year run with those guys?
Scott, you want to take that, or you want me?
Yeah, I think obviously there's just some matches that are made in heaven, and that was one of them. I think I had the ability to see Coach Payton in the Dallas Cowboys offense before we both went to New Orleans. And he didn't have the talent in Dallas that he had in New Orleans that they accumulated. And it started with the quarterback position. But I saw Coach Payton work wonders with Quincy Carter at quarterback, Vinny Testaverde, Drew Bledsoe. I mean, he was a phenomenal offensive mind. And I think Drew had some solid seasons in San Diego, but there's a reason why they drafted Phillip Rivers. They didn't see Drew as a franchise quarterback. So if you ask me, early on in 2006 to maybe 2009, I think Coach Payton was more responsible for Drew Brees turning into Drew Brees. And since that time, Drew has just been on a phenomenal run. But I think Drew Brees needed Sean Payton more than the other way around in 2006.
See, this is why we work so well together, and we're separated by states and everything right now, because I'm totally with Scott, and I know when Scott when he asks us questions, he hates when we give him the same answer. Yeah. But I'm with you, and Mike, I would answer it that it's 50-50, but here's why I say that, and it's exact. Scott just took the words right out of my mouth. I would say the first 3-4, if you want to go maybe 5 years, I would have gone 60-40 Payton to Brees. Why? It's Payton's system. He needed to go find a guy that fit he had the system in Dallas. He wanted to carry that system and build on it, but you got to go find the right guy. If you've got a great offense and you have somebody that can't zip those quick 5-yard and in 7 and outs, 15s, and then, of course, certainly in his prime down the field, well, then who cares how good the system is, because you don't have the players that work it. He had the system. He brought a player in that could answer it, could execute it, and then could take it the next step. And then I think as Brees has gone on and proven all those detractors wrong, I think it flipped. And I think it's 60-40 Brees, maybe 65-35, because I think now Drew has even allowed Sean to change some of his game plan because he now knows how good this guy is. He has never been bothered by injuries. He's always there. Does he always have a perfect game? Absolutely not. But we would all take him every single week and roll the dice and figure that one bad game he's going to give us, 5 outstanding games and 3 really, really good games. And those games are better than most people's best games. So when you average it all out, I'd say it's 50-50, but I would slant it early on. First 4 or 5 years, it was Payton, and then it flipped. And then it's become Drew Brees more important. And Sean's been able to, and probably Sean's time away from the game gave him a little bit of time to evaluate it as well. You can now adjust that system and adapt it to what Drew can do at this age, plus the other players you're bringing him around him, plugging in those pieces.
You're right, Vic. I hate it when you guys agree. And I really hate it when we all agree, because I think it's we could spend a whole podcast talking about, the whole Payton Brees dynamic, but I agree with, both your points that, how the percentages have kind of fluctuated, Victor. You make a good point there. And Shanle, you're right. I think early on, it was more Payton, and to me, I don't think Payton gets enough credit in all this, and I'm not taking anything away from Drew Brees. I mean, what he's done, and we've heard the story, Scott, in these podcasts from you and all the players who were in Millsaps in that camp, and Brees did not look good in that preseason, and he didn't look good in those early practices, but boy, what a story he has become in the state of Louisiana, in the city of New Orleans. I mean, you have guys like Kyler Murray drafted, and there's a Mount Rushmore of guys who were small quarterbacks, and Drew Brees is the godfather now. I mean, it's amazing climb what's happened the last 13 years. Well, I know Victor's a busy man.
Mike, one of the things too, because Scott talks about this a lot when we're on the show, because I'll ask his perspective. It tells you much more about Payton, about Brees' impact as well, when Scott will tell you from a defensive side that he's got his own responsibilities that he had to worry about on defense, but when number 9 spoke, everybody listened. Whether it was defense or offense, whether he's addressing the other 10 guys that he's out there with to pass, or whether he's just talking, all of a sudden, Scott will say, oh yeah, we're in the locker room when 9 talks, he got everybody's attention. And that just tells you how he kind of just assumed into that role and nobody has doubted him. So whether he's talking his side of the ball or side of the ball when he's never even on the field, when Scott's telling me we all listen, I'm like, that's good enough for me. That tells me exactly what kind of weight he carries.
Yeah, Victor, I was just going to comment on that real quick, because I think one of the other points that gets lost is I've said Drew Brees is the best leader I've ever been around. I think maybe when he was in San Diego, he wasn't given that leeway as a young player to take over that role. From 2006, when he was brought in as a franchise quarterback, he was automatically expected to fill that role, and it was a role that he was made for. And so maybe that elevation, that status right off the bat, maybe he never had that in San Diego, and maybe that's why he didn't flourish the way he did early on. I'd like to think it's more the X's and O's, but unfortunately, we're going to get an answer to this real soon. Drew's career is coming to an end. Just like with New England, it's the old who gets more credit, Belichick, Brady. You're going to have the Saints and the Patriots finding out probably within the next 4 to 5 years just who probably deserves some of that credit if the coaches stick around.
Well, unfortunately, that should have been a big storyline in Atlanta this year, but that didn't happen. So that would have been nice to kind of bandy that around with the Patriots and the Saints in the Super Bowl. More likely that didn't happen, but speaking of more likely, Justin, you know what time it is. Victor Howell, you can use profanity in this version of More Likely. That's our podcast music for More Likely. 3 hypotheticals. We love to tease Vic about how much he loves this segment on TV, but this is the podcast version. I'm going to bring in some questions we've asked some of our guests previously and see how you feel about this. And Shanle, of course, you can weigh in too. If you've been around the Saints for a long time, Vic. Okay, you've seen a lot of different head coaches, but if you were taking a cross-country trip and you had to pick one head coach, you're driving out of your driveway in Baton Rouge, you had to drive to San Diego, and waiting for you, Bum Phillips, Jim Mora, Jim Haslett, or Sean Payton. You only get one. They got to ride shotgun cross-country. Which one you picking?
Oh, wow. Well, you left out the one that I was going to say would have been the wildest, and that would have been Ditka, because you would have pulled up somewhere at a gas station. He would have dumped the whole car like an apple pie.
I put Ditka in there. I apologize, because he wasn't around that long, so I kind of forgot about him. But, yeah, you put him in there.
Yeah, he wasn't around that long. Why? Because he took the whole draft and threw it away for a running back that didn't work. He wasn't around. I mean, he's easy to forget. Look, Peyton's such an X and O guy. More to me would be fun just because he's got that kind of quirky personality. Everybody knows about the whole playoffs. But just with some of the things he says, I think he would be an interesting ride. Plus, he would have a lot of conversation of the budding of the building years and the budding, if you will, of this program, because he was there with a lot of the struggles, found a little success, but couldn't get it to the point where Peyton was. So Ditka would be fun, but since you didn't list him originally, I'll kind of go with Moore.
Shanle, I don't know if you've ever answered this question. You got to go with your coach, right?
Yeah, I'm going to go with Coach Payton, because we've talked about Coach here a few times. You get the coach Sean Payton in the post-game, pre-game press conferences. Larry Holder gave us a little bit of insight to away from football Sean Payton. I think he would be a pretty interesting passenger on a ride along. There's much more depth to Coach Payton than what you see in the press conferences. I think he'd be a good conversationalist.
Yeah, if I pick Peyton up, we're going to stop on the way and see a Jimmy Buffett concert and maybe a Kenny Chesney concert too. So it'd be a fun trip to San Diego. All right, more likely number 2. We have asked the players this and gotten different answers. And Shanle kind of threw a wrinkle into this that I like too. If you're stuck on a desert island and you have to pick one New Orleans Saint in the Sean Payton, Drew Brees era to be on the island, and then, I kind of asked that question, but Shanle threw the wrinkle in, what was it? Is it going to make you laugh or is it going to save your life? What'd you say, Shanle?
Yeah, well, everybody kept trying to think who would keep them company, and they kept thinking of, just like the ride-along, the conversationalist. But I threw in there, if you're on an island, you're probably going to need survival skills. That's why I always went with Scott Fujita, because he'll live off the land. He'll keep me alive as long as possible. So that's another little bit of food for thought with this question.
Vic, who would you pick? Desert Island, one player in the Saints era. You're not going to be there forever, but you're going to be there a little while.
Okay. All right. So I have to ask, is the island ripe with vegetation and or animals?
See, that's why Vic goes next level on it, man.
Well, no, here's why.
It can be whatever you want it to be, but it's deserted and you're going to spend a long time with them. Okay,
but I like where Scott's going with Vegeta. I can see that, but I'm going to catch you on this one here. Because the island is filled with animals that need to be caught and killed so we can then cook, I'm going Kyle Turley.
Nice.
Because Turley had that I don't give a crap attitude, and if you needed something, he would say, like to me, sit down, boy, I'll take care of this. And he would go out and hunt and kill and bring it back, and then we'd go on from there. How about that?
Wow. That's off the cuff. That's off the cuff.
And when you need music, he could figure out how to make a guitar out of the bamboo.
I love it. You know what's funny about Kyle Turley? I mean, you guys may know the story, but he went to San Diego State, And there was a kid that lived in his neighborhood, and he used to give a bunch of Saints memorabilia to when he'd come home. The kid's name was Reggie Bush. I don't know if you guys knew that story or not.
Oh, didn't know that.
We're going next level, a little higher here. You know what? I sometimes I make up these more likelies when we're doing the podcast because I have some idle time here a little bit. But I think the last one is, one thing I really appreciate about Victor Howell is he's a great family man. And how old are your triplets now?
Oh my goodness! Well, the triplets will be 6 in 4 weeks. So we're five plus. They'll be 6 here shortly.
Okay, more likely, how are you surviving with triplets? And you have you're the only guy in the house, man. How more likely? How does Victor Howell survive?
Bourbon.
Yeah,
that's an easy answer right there, my man. That's an easy answer. You get home. You get home after a long day, and you pick, like today. I've got my oldest. I've got 4 girls. The oldest is 10. She's at Broadway camp for 3 weeks. She's done it the last 3 years. They learn a performance in 3 weeks, and then they put it on in the big theater. I got to pick her up. I'll go get the triplets from the babysitter. I take them to their swim lessons. You come home, and then you pour a nice bottle of Stag or a nice bottle of Old Elk, a little bit on ice. You sit down and you say, "Girls, tell Daddy about your day." And you just let everybody talk. Everybody's always has something to complain about. Hey, don't worry about it. We're going to fix that. All right, let's go bathe up, do some homework, do some reading. Yeah, it's a lot of that. Food helps because you don't want to hit that too hard and too heavy. But yeah, definitely. No, and it's also a loving wife with all the travels and everything, because there's a lot that goes to it. But I appreciate you asking it. Yes, but you will more often than not find me with a little glass of yellow tinted something over ice.
I will say this: your wife is exceptional, Crystal. But I love on social media. I always see the dresses are perfect. It's just unbelievable the job you've done with those girls. But I commend you, my friend.
I appreciate that. When you see the hair done, if it's a straight ponytail and the hair is loose, that's probably me. When it looks good and there's a good bow in it, that's her. There's a good chance I might have gotten the girl's dress, got the shoes on the right foot. Everything else is all mama.
I remember going to your house when they were just born, and I'm thinking, man, how is he going to do this? And you know what? You've done a great job. I mean, it's been unbelievable. It's a joy to watch. But well, listen, we covered the gamut from Bourbon to Kyle Turley to Zion to Sean Payton to Drew Brees. CST's Victor Howell, and he's so much more. You do so many things. I know you call a lot of games for ESPN basketball-wise, but you're a great friend. I know Shanle loves working with you. I do too. Football season will be here before we know it, and we'll have to have you back on, but we appreciate being a part of Victor Howell's first ever podcast.
It is my first one. I very much appreciate it. Happy for you guys, both very good friends. I was happy to hear you all are doing it. Thanks for the invite. And let's do it again on the podcast, and look forward to seeing you guys in person. Coming up here in a couple of months, September rolls around, we'll be back at it.
Victor Howell, one of my best friends and a guy who's really great to work with, very talented guy. We appreciate him. We'll definitely have him back. But before we're done, Justin, it's time for Little Lania. Justin, a little extra. What do you have for us this week?
After my one for today, I know it's going to sound like I'm a spokesperson for HBO, but lately we've been watching Chernobyl on HBO, and I'll keep it brief. Everyone knows about Chernobyl and the accident that happened there, but it's a great show, and it's amazing to see all the people who sacrifice their lives knowing that they would probably die or have a shortened life to minimize the amount of damage that happened there and to help prevent it from being much worse as it could have been. It's a great show. Go watch it. Last episode airs, I think, next Monday.
Very nice. I don't get HBO anymore, but if I have a show that I like Showtime, I love Millions, and I'll get Showtime for a little bit with Millions, and then I'll cancel it.
You mean Billions, right?
Isn't it Billions? I'm sorry. Yes, Billions. And Showtime, if you're hearing that, I'm sorry. That's just kind of Shanle, what you got for us? I'm
going to have to use this summer, probably after the NBA Finals is over, to catch up on a lot of series and a lot of TV. But I go from the NFL to the NBA, and my downtime to catch up on TV is usually June, July, August, get ready for the Saints season. I think I'm going to go with the NBA playoffs. The Toronto Raptors in their first ever NBA Finals, which is tremendous storyline going against the Warriors, who are going to be without Kevin Durant. It's going to be a better series than I think a lot of people think. I think it could go 6 or 7. I still like the Warriors, but the general gist of this long lanyap I'm giving is I don't feel like the youth today appreciate the Warriors the way they should. And the reason I say that is because both my boys are sitting there and they root against the Warriors all the time. And finally, just the other day, I said to them, do you guys realize this is one of 3 teams to go to 5 straight finals? Just like I grew up with the Chicago Bulls and people grew up with the Lakers and people grew up with the Celtics. This is your guys' time and era to tell your kids you got to see one of the greatest dynasties in NBA history. And I don't feel like people appreciate the Warriors. I don't know if it's envious, the envious age of kids today, and there's a little bit of jealousy or what it is, but I just feel like the Warriors are hated on for what they've done in the historical terms of the NBA.
Well, what makes them amazing to me, though, is they're winning without their best player. And I think they still would have potentially won without him. And you talk about lanyap. I mean, Kevin Durant's the ultimate lanyap on that team.
Yeah, he's going to be the storyline. And what's interesting is his injury sounds more like an Achilles than a calf. If he doesn't play at all in the finals and they lose, I could see him going back to the Warriors for another year and trying to get another title. And now that blows up all of the New York Knicks, Kevin Durant, Kyrie, Zion Williamson. Everything blows up in poor New York Knicks fans' face if that happens.
And you know what, though? I think Kevin Durant's a sensitive guy. You see how he is on social media, Scott. Here's my thing with him. I think he's won one there. He's proven, okay, I got my ring. I think he wants to prove, you know what? I can win with my team. You know, because he's always got that chip on his shoulder because when LeBron's healthy and when LeBron's in the playoffs, he gets all the attention. I think Kevin Durant has to go somewhere and lead a team and not just be kind of the accessory. That's my opinion.
He certainly has the talent. I believe he's the best basketball player in the world right now. I think LeBron James looked like he's aged and lost that title last year. I definitely think he could carry a team. But you got to go to the right situation. You got to go to the right team that has good management, a good owner that is not dysfunctional. That's going to get you another probably superstar player because you need that to win another championship. So that with all those unknowns, I'm starting to lean towards him going back to Golden State for one more year.
Interesting. It seems like the NBA offseason is more exciting than the playoffs sometimes, and that's maybe a problem for the NBA because we look forward to where these guys are going because Houston looks like they're going to blow up that team and LeBron's going to get some supporting parts. So my lanyap's pretty quick, and it amazes me. I hate to see this little girl get hit with a foul ball in Houston this week. It was the Cubs and the Astros playing. She was taken to the hospital. Her condition wasn't immediately available, but she appeared to be conscious as she was being carried away. Guys, isn't it amazing? They've been playing baseball all these years, and just recently in the last couple of years, they extended the netting, right? And now they're going to probably have to extend it even more. It's amazing to me, guys, that this hasn't happened more often. I mean, how many baseball games have been played over the years, and this is suddenly a phenomenon? I mean, these fans sit very close. I mean, I remember when my oldest daughter was born, I got great seats. I was sitting right behind the dugout. I really couldn't enjoy the game. I was nervous the whole time. Like, was a bat going to come loose and hit us or a foul ball? I mean, I was watching her more in the game like any father should. But I'm amazed with all the baseball games played over the years that this hasn't happened more often, frankly.
I remember, I was going to say, I remember a couple of years ago, they had the great shot of the father who had the sleeping baby in his arm and with the other hand caught a ball. And I think those are the kind of moments that people, celebrate. And you're right, Mike. I know they extended the netting and the teams even took it further than what the league asked. A lot of teams extended even more. And, you hate to see something like that. And sometimes it takes an incident that happens for people to question and talk about changes. I mean, look at what happened with the Saints. Obviously, we keep talking about that. But I'm amazed that and thankfully that doesn't happen more often.
Yeah, I'm not glad it didn't happen more often. I'm just saying it's just amazing to me. The law of averages, you would have figured at some point, even minor league games. I mean, you don't hear about it anywhere. And then all of a sudden it's happening quite a bit. I know the NHL was very proactive when something happened in their game. It was the first year I covered the NHL. And they were very proactive, putting netting all over the place, and it hasn't happened since. You'll wonder if Major League Baseball will follow suit. And I can't blame Major League Baseball because it wasn't a problem for many, many years. Well, listen, this wraps up another Been There, Done That podcast. Thank you, Justin Thomas. Thank you, Scott Shanle. We'd like to thank our man, Victor Howell. You can catch us on many platforms: iTunes, Podbean, Stitcher, Google, and Spotify. That wraps up another one. We'll talk to you again next week.